Hi, welcome. On this video, I'd like to take a few minutes to discuss the importance of the specifics of the methodology itself as it relates to training dogs. And how I approach training, what you'll see is very different than the majority of systems because I approach it at an intervention level, because that's really what I show very clearly. That's really what training represents in the first place. Whether people see it, whether they deny it, whether they try to get out from underneath this whole dominance issue. What I clearly show is oftentimes, even when people take, the dominance issue itself, for example, they're beyond just that word being used as a way to market a certain way of thinking. It really doesn't represent how dominance, or the issue of dominance, is really defined at the relational level to even begin with. It's really more so about what nature represents at that level through mind and body, through the whole person. And so and going a little further, how physical force and how that's being defined as well through various interactions oftentimes is not being represented properly as well through, on top of that, through nature. So, because what I show very clearly is nature doesn't fully reveal itself at the appearance level. In fact, a lot of things that you'll see through physical response can actually be totally opposite to what it appears to be, which goes right to the heart of why so many people end up failing through systems which just say basically if it looks good and it feels good, it must be good. And that's a wrong way of thinking, because what I show is you have to put physical response within the right relational context, within the right framework when it comes to how a dog's decision-making process is being influenced. And oftentimes there can actually be a disconnect, or the motives that are attached to response can be totally reversed, which means the dog is merely moving around for a motivating agent such as a treat or something that the dog wants or is established that way. And even while the dog is continuing to objectify and see that owner as merely a resource to getting what they want. And that's why you won't get clarity in these controlled environments. You'll get actually deceived or fooled into making certain assumptions that basically aren't true. So when people who promote learning-based ideology beyond the boundary lines of common sense and good judgment, when they're making assumptions about what the sit, down, and stay are supposed to represent by way of a similar like-minded state, what I show is it's very clear that it doesn't always represent that relational change is actually happening at that level. And so the real test is when you connect the right relational dots. And when I say that, I mean when you look at unwanted behavior itself and whether or not that's diminishing. Okay, whether or not the jumping behaviors are going away, even the issue of stress and anxiety over the dog, what's called defined as fear aggression. What I show with that issue is that is an issue that those who promote learning-based ideology, within the context of not meeting the dog's relational needs, they're trying to get around this whole idea of leadership. That's very common to have those issues with dogs, because that's something that just doesn't clear up on itself and actually represents a dog holding on to the burden of the lead role and the stress that results from that. So, but getting back to the whole specifics of the model itself, when you look at how I approach training, just at both the intervention level, but the specifics of the methodology that I use, I'm defining it. I'm being very specific and very deliberate in the context or how I'm creating change. So when you see me using, I define as follow-up moments or define as, relational influence, I'm asking the questions, how do you get from point A to point B in the relationship and create the correct type of meaningful change which is going to influence unwanted behavior if you're already walking on sand. Okay, and so what's the end game here? What, when you look at even at using a correction, what is a correction? Is it how are we applying that, and how are we interpreting that, in terms of how we establish what we define as bad behavior, for example. I mean, is it how effective is that approach or that model with creating relational change? And so what this system does is it provides a clear path to answer that core question as to what we're really doing when we want to change how a dog thinks, how a dog expresses certain states of mind. So this model, what it does is it answers that question. The focus is on moving the relationship forward and getting to where you need to go with clarity. And so even with going through the motions, this system, it basically it just whittles it down to the very basic core of what's happening between dogs and owners. So when you're using a interaction, working off an interaction, it's basically designed to change how the owner thinks, which changes how the dog thinks. So I just would encourage you to really think about training, step back a little bit from it. When people fail or they experience limited results, it's no accident or coincidence. It's a direct result of a failure to meet that dog's relational needs. And then you get into the specifics as to what the ideology is or the idea of the approach is. What you'll see again is you have to be able to qualify response. You have to be able to put it in the right context, and otherwise you could be deceived. And there's a lot of things with training, with the relational dynamics of things, that can really line up a certain way to take people's legs completely out, including trainers. It's very, very common. And so this system, again, answers those core questions. It's built on answering the question of what is training, right from the start. What does it represent? And again, it's an intervention. So anyway, if you need help, I encourage you to check out my system of training. There's several options available on the website. And again, I just encourage you to step back and think a little bit about, what is training, right from the start. And what you'll find is it's a little more going on than what is seen from the surface. So thanks very much for watching. Hope you have a great day.